All right, so today we've got three brand new fragrances from the house of Lucianno. This is going to be a part of their Titan collection, and all three of these fragrances are actually inspirations of Parfums de Marly fragrances. So the first one is going to be Luciano's Dynasty, and then we have Luciano's Legacy, and then the last one is Luciano's Bourbon. All right, so Bourbon, this is going to be their inspiration of Parfums de Marly's Althair. The Legacy is going to be their interpretation of Haltane. And Dynasty is going to be their interpretation of Perseus. All right. So I was, pretty interested in these inspirations when I saw them on the fragrancebuy.ca page. So I went ahead and picked all three of them up to, do this video on. And in this video, I'm going to be giving my sort of first impressions. So not like a full review or anything like that, but just my first impressions of what I think about these fragrances and how well they seem to come to like the original fragrances. All right, so this is the presentation that you get with all three bottles. You get like the front of the bottle is like on one side of the box here, and then you've got just like the name and everything on the other side. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the bottle looks like. You've got Dynasty by Lucianno, Titan collection. All of these are eau de parfum concentrations. And then up top, you got the Lucianno logo. Nothing on the side except for this sort of textured design. Like I said, you've got the name of the fragrance and then the name of the line here on the back. And on the bottom, you've got like the ingredients, the barcode, and then like the batch code. All right, so just really simple packaging for all three of these. And then the bottles for these are actually, they're very sort of simplistic looking, but at the same time, I do like the way that these look. So they all kind of have like this sort of gradient, sort of style bottle. The texture on like the top where it gets dark, it does kind of feel like almost sort of like a matte finish sort of. And then, this down here just feels like regular glass. But you've got the name of the fragrance, again, the line, and then the concentration here. The cap, it's a pretty light, cheap, plastic filling cap. But I will say that the sprayers on all three of these are actually very good. They're not like pressurized sprayers, but they shoot out a generous amount of juice. All right. So that is pretty much, that's the presentation of all three bottles. Obviously, each one of the bottles are going to be a slightly different color, but you get the gist of what these bottles look like for the most part. All right. Now, the first fragrance that I'm going to start off with here is actually the one that I was most interested in when it came to, these fragrances. And that's going to be this one, Dynasty. So I hadn't smelled Perseus before. That's, one of Parfums de Marly's like newest releases. So I hadn't smelled that fragrance yet. And I was definitely curious to know what the sort of scent profile smelled like. So this was definitely, in my opinion, a good introduction, into that sort of Perseus scent profile. Now, if you're not familiar with the way that Perseus smells, just to kind of go over the notes of that fragrance, Perseus, the top notes are going to be grapefruit, bergamot, and blackcurrant. In the mid, you have vetiver, green mandarin, and geranium. And then in the base, you have drywood, ambergris, cashmere wood, balsam fir, tonka bean, and cedar. So to my nose, like, when I spray this fragrance on, whether it be the Dynasty or, the actual like, Perseus, the main thing that I get from this is like, sort of like a blast of citruses up top, but I also get like this sort of dry vetiver and like woods combination for the most part. That's pretty much what I get from the scent profile. It's a fresh fragrance for sure, but it's definitely different. I would say definitely a lot different from most other sort of fresh fragrances that at least that I've smelled anyway. This isn't like a aquatic fragrance. At the same time, it's also not like a super fruity, like in your face fruity fragrance. That's not necessarily the vibe that I get from this one. This is definitely pretty unique. Also the geranium in this is definitely pretty heavy as well. That's definitely one of the things that I get from this fragrance. And when comparing the Dynasty to Perseus, what I will say is this does come pretty close to Perseus. So in my opinion, so far, this is probably about like 85%, there when it comes to Perseus. The biggest difference though is Perseus to me, it just has more depth, it has more body to it. Things just seem to pop a little bit better in the Perseus fragrance from Parfums de Marly than what it does in Dynasty. Now, again, this is still a very solid, inspiration of that fragrance. And I mean, considering that I believe this fragrance is like $40 or so, $40 or $42, something like that on fragrancebuy.ca for this 100 ml bottle. Whereas compared to the Parfums de Marly Perseus, it's going to run you a lot more than that for, 120 ml bottle. So, this is definitely, it's not a 1-to-1 for sure, but in my opinion, it does come, pretty close. The main thing is, like, to me, the quality is not exactly there when it comes to, comparing this to the Parfums de Marly. The way that the black currant and, the other sort of citruses come off in Perseus, to me, they're just brighter, they're denser, they smell of higher quality. And then even like the way that the sort of vetiver and woods kind of come across in, the Dynasty, they're just not as rich, in my opinion, as what they are in the Parfums de Marly. But again, this is still a very, very solid inspiration. I think most people are probably going to be pretty happy with this one, especially if they haven't actually smelled the original fragrance. I think that, most people, if they like this sort of scent profile, they're going to like it, regardless, So I think that this is, again, a very solid choice. So I do recommend this for, right now, what would be, I believe, the only sort of, cheap alternative to Perseus that's out there so far. All right. So that's Dynasty. And then the other one here is Legacy. All right. So Legacy, again, like I stated, this is going to be their inspiration of Haltane. Okay. And so this is what the bottle looks like. So it's just the same thing, just like a green and black sort of gradient bottle. All right, so for the notes for Haltane, with that one, you're going to get in the top clary sage, lavender, and bergamot. In the mid, saffron and praline. And then in the base, you have oud and cedar. And this, to me, is actually, I would say, slightly better than what Dynasty was in terms of an inspiration to the original. This one is slightly better. This one, when compared to Haltane, I would say that this one is probably going to be like around that 90-ish% close, to Haltane. This, especially when compared to Hartnell, it is, in my opinion, up there with Hartnell. So, I mean, there are some sort of slight differences, in my opinion, between Hartnell and this. But in terms of, how close it, comes to the original in terms of like the quality, in my opinion, it is up there with Haltane for sure. Now, Haltane to me, like I mentioned before in previous videos, Haltane doesn't necessarily have as much of that sort of, herbal sort of feel that you get to the fragrance, which I believe is coming from mainly from that, clary sage, that clary sage and lavender and bergamot sort of combination that you get up top. This one to me leans more so kind of into like that sort of praline and saffron. Whereas I think the legacy from Lucianno, this one actually does have, slightly more of sort of like that herbal feel to the fragrance, in my opinion. Now, it doesn't necessarily do it right away though. That's the thing. So in my opinion, when you first spray on Haltane is actually going to smell, in my opinion, closer to the original than what Legacy does. To me, it definitely has more of sort of like a woodier feel to it when you first spray it on. But then as it starts to dry down, then I feel like that's when it starts to, get slightly more kind of herbal and, closer to the original for sure, in my opinion. Whereas again, with the Haltane, to me, this one, you could say it kind of starts off slightly herbal, not really that much, definitely not as much as, what the original one does. But as this starts to dry down, to me, this definitely, it leans more into that kind of sweet praline note that you get from, Haltane. So with the Legacy, this one so far, I would also definitely recommend this one as like an alternative to Haltane. This I believe is also going for about $40 or so on fragrancepie.ca. With Haltane, I believe like when I bought this fragrance at that particular time, I believe Banadier Fragrance was really the only one selling it. I do think now Oud Store has it. So that would really be your only place that you would be able to get this fragrance from, I believe. I don't think I've seen this on places like Triple Traders or Frag Bar or, fragrancepie.ca or anything like that. So this Haltane is definitely going to be a little bit harder to find, than something like Legacy will, unless this, becomes sold out almost immediately. But in my opinion, these two, I can't necessarily say that one is, better than the other, because again, this one, in my opinion, in some ways is slightly closer to the original, than, what this one is. But I would say, in my opinion, the Haltane, in my opinion, there are certain parts of the fragrance where, the Haltane just actually smells slightly higher quality than what the Legacy does. So there are kind of like some trade-offs in like different areas at different points in time, within the fragrance. But I think equally these two are, really solid choices for alternatives to Haltane. All right. So that one again is Legacy from Lucianno. And then the last one is again Bourbon, and this is their take on Althair. So this is actually, to me, the best one out of all three in terms of how close it is to the original and like the quality and stuff like that. This is definitely the best one in my opinion. So this is definitely, in my opinion, as good as Liquid Brune from French Avenue, Fragrance World. And in my opinion, at least in the opening anyway, the Bourbon actually does the opening slightly more accurate than what the French Avenue does, the Liquid Brune. So when I did my comparison video between Liquid Brune and Althair, the main thing that I've sort of noticed was that in Althair, it had a heavier emphasis on that sort of fresh bergamot note that you got, in the very sort of opening spray of that fragrance. Whereas, in my opinion, Liquid Brune, it still had the, sort of fresh bergamot opening, but it wasn't as prominent, as what it is in the original fragrance. In my opinion, the bourbon, it still has like that same emphasis on the, fresh bergamot that you get when you first spray the fragrance on that Althair does. So this one actually, in my opinion, it is slightly more accurate than what Liquid Brune is. Now, that difference, it only lasts, minutes pretty much, like, maybe 5 to 7 minutes or so of the opening spray of the fragrance. So it's not like a huge deal at all. But if you're someone who, for whatever reason, you really love that, fresh opening that you get, that fresh but slightly sort of spicy and, obviously vanillic and sweet opening of the original, then, you'll want to go with this one, the bourbon from Lucianno. In terms of like a quality difference between, this and Liquid Brune, I don't really pick up on any sort of difference in quality between these two fragrances. To me, these two, especially once you get past like that, first opening 5 to 10 minutes or so of the scent, the two fragrances, in my opinion, for the most part, they smell, about the same. I really couldn't pick up on too much of any sort of difference, between the two fragrances. And I mean, if anyone can, it has to be absolutely just minimal differences. Now, if you're not familiar with the notes of Althair, the notes are going to be in the top notes. You have cinnamon, cardamom, orange blossom, and bergamot. And then in the mid, you have bourbon, vanilla, elemi. And then in the base, you have praline, musk, ambroxan, gaiac wood, candied almond, and tonka. So just a really sort of, sweet, but, at the same time, I would say it's not like a heavy or dense vanilla fragrance. It's not cloyingly sweet or anything like that. This is definitely, more kind of masculine sort of take on a vanilla scent, in my opinion, anyway. So, definitely, in my opinion, I think you can't really go wrong with either one of these. I believe if you get these two from, fragrancebuy.ca anyway, I believe these two are about the same price. Maybe the French Avenue might be a little bit more. This one might be closer to like around $48 or something like that. Whereas, and actually that is the case. So this is actually cheaper than the other two fragrances in the line. I believe the bourbon is like only $30, whereas the other ones are $40. And then you have Liquid Brune, which, like I said again, I believe this is closer to like almost $50. So, I mean, that is a considerable difference in price. I don't know how, much different these fragrances will get as they sort of sit and, maturate. They already smell pretty much identical to the original fragrance. I would say if I gave this fragrance a 98%, out of 100, this is easily like a 99% out of 100, just because of the way that, it's able to replicate the opening of Althair. So, man, I guess technically you could say that the bourbon is a better, inspiration of Althair than what Liquid Brune is, at least so far. Now, in terms of like the performance and stuff like that with all three of these fragrances, that'll definitely be for, a later video. I just wanted to kind of get this video out there, to let you all know exactly how close these are, to the originals, and, for you all to be able to make a decision on whether or not you actually want to purchase any of these based on that information or not. All right. So again, we have bourbon, Legacy, and then the last one here is Dynasty. These are definitely pretty solid, releases from the house of Lucianno, in my opinion. Definitely high quality smelling. Most of these, get at least 90%, close to the original scent profile. And these are definitely priced pretty fairly, in my opinion. If you're able to get them from a site like fragrancebuy.ca or Fragflex, I believe, should also have these as well. I don't know if Lucianno has some sort of exclusivity, to Fragrance Buy and Fragflex, because that's been really the only store that I've been able to find these fragrances at. But I would definitely recommend only purchasing these fragrances from there to, maybe avoid, getting price gouged somewhere else for these fragrances. All right. So that's my take on the Titan series from Lucianno. Let me know what you all think about these fragrances, if you all actually have them yet. And if so, do you agree with my assessment of these fragrances when compared to the originals? All right. Let me know in the comments below. And also, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see y'all in the next video.